I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water, staring at the stack of dishes from dinner. The china pattern, delicate blue flowers on white porcelain, had been a wedding gift 34 years ago. Richard and I had used these plates for every special occasion. Now I was washing them alone, in my son's house, at 57 years old, while he stood behind me with his arms crossed. "Are you even listening to me, Mom?" Daniel's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned slowly, drying my hands on the dish towel. My son's face was flushed red, a vein pulsing at his temple. I'd seen that expression before, on his father's face during the 2 times in our marriage when Richard had truly lost his temper. But Richard had never directed that anger at me. "I'm listening," I said quietly. "Good, because I'm done with this. Either you start pulling your weight around here, or you need to seriously consider other living arrangements." He paused, and I watched something shift in his eyes, something cold. "Like a nursing home." The words hung between us. I felt my breath catch, but I didn't let my expression change. 32 years of raising this man, of sacrificing, of loving him unconditionally, and he'd just suggested I belong in a nursing home because I hadn't immediately jumped to wash dishes after cooking a 3-course meal for his family. "Daniel," I started. "No, Mom, I mean it. Either you wash these dishes right now and start actually contributing, or maybe it's time we looked at assisted living facilities. Melissa and I have been talking, and we can't keep doing this." "Melissa?" "Of course. I should have known his wife was behind this." She'd been making comments for weeks now, little digs about me relaxing all day while she worked so hard, pointed remarks about the guest room I occupied that could be so useful as a home office. I looked at my son, really looked at him. His hair was uncombed, his t-shirt stained. He was 32 years old, and I'd given him everything. The down payment on this very house where he now stood threatening me. The money for his MBA that he'd never finished. The car in the driveway. The countless loans I'd never asked him to repay. "You want me to wash the dishes?" I said slowly. "Or move to a nursing home?" "An assisted living facility," he corrected, as if that somehow made it better. "You're getting older, Mom. Maybe you need more help than we can provide." I was 57. I ran 5 miles 3 times a week. I'd retired from a 28-year career as a marketing executive just 4 months ago with a pension, investments, and $4.2 million in assets. I needed help with exactly nothing. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, his tone shifting slightly. Uncertain now. "Making a call," I said calmly. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed a name. The phone rang once, twice. Daniel was watching me now, his anger giving way to something that looked almost like concern. "Catherine?" The voice on the other end was warm, professional. "Is everything all right?" "Thomas," I said, keeping my eyes on my son's face. "I need you to come over to Daniel's house, now, and bring the documents we discussed last week." "The Palmer Estates brochures?" "Yes, all of them. I've made my decision." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" "Catherine, we talked about this being a last resort. I'm absolutely certain. 30 minutes?" "I'll be there in 20. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Daniel was staring at me now, his expression confused. "Who was that?" he demanded. "What documents?" "That was your Uncle Thomas," I said. "He's bringing over some information about where I'll be living." I saw it then, the flicker of relief in his eyes. He actually looked pleased. He thought I was capitulating, agreeing to his absurd demand. He thought I was calling to arrange my own exile to some depressing facility where he could forget about me. "Mom, if you think that's best—" "I do think it's best," I interrupted, "for both of us, clearly." I walked past him, out of the kitchen, and into the living room. Melissa was on the couch, her phone in her hand as always, probably posting another photo to her Instagram account where she pretended to be a successful influencer. She looked up as I entered. "Did he tell you?" she asked, not bothering with pretense. "About the nursing home?" "Yes, he told me." "Assisted living," she corrected, echoing Daniel's earlier words. "And honestly, Catherine, it might be for the best. You've been here for 3 weeks now, and it's just not working out. We need our space." 3 weeks. I'd been staying with them for 3 weeks while my new apartment downtown was being renovated. 3 weeks during which I'd cooked dinner every single night, grocery shopped, cleaned the guest bathroom they never used, and contributed $500 toward their mortgage payment without being asked. "I understand completely," I said, my voice steady. "I've made arrangements." Melissa's eyebrows rose. "Already? Well, that was fast. Daniel just talked to you 5 minutes ago." "I'm very efficient," I replied. I sat down in the armchair across from her and waited. The next 20 minutes crawled by. Daniel came in from the kitchen, sitting next to his wife. They whispered to each other, Melissa's hand on his knee, his posture relaxing. They thought they'd won. They thought the problem of Catherine was solving itself. I thought about the last 3 years since Richard's death, how lost I'd felt in that big house we'd built together, every room echoing with memories. How I'd finally found the courage to sell it 6 months ago, to start fresh. How I'd been looking forward to my new apartment, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, 2 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen. The renovation was almost complete. 2 more weeks, the contractor had told me yesterday. 2 more weeks I'd planned to stay with Daniel and Melissa. 2 more weeks that had just become impossible. The doorbell rang. Daniel stood up, looking at me uncertainly. "That's probably Uncle Thomas?" "Yes," I said. "Please let him in." My son walked to the door, and I heard his voice greeting his uncle. Thomas Whitmore was 65, Richard's older brother, and one of the finest men I'd ever known. He'd been my rock since Richard's death, helping me navigate the estate, the lawyers, the endless paperwork. And when I'd called him last week, upset after Melissa had made a comment about me being a burden, he'd taken me to lunch and listened to everything. "I hate seeing you treated this way," he'd said over coffee. "You deserve so much better." "I don't want to cause problems between Daniel and me," I'd replied. "He's all I have left." Thomas had reached across the table and taken my hand. "Catherine, you have yourself. You have your friends. You have the whole life ahead of you that you and Richard planned for your retirement. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Then he'd done something unexpected. He'd pulled out several glossy brochures from his briefcase. "These are luxury senior living communities," he'd said. "I want you to look at them. Not because I think you need to live there, but because I want you to see what Daniel and Melissa are suggesting when they talk about assisted living. I want you to see what they think you're worth." I'd looked through the brochures: Palmer Estates, Sunset Gardens, Heritage Manor, beautiful facilities, all of them. Expensive, too. The lowest monthly fee was $8,000. The highest was $15,000 for a luxury suite. "These places are lovely," I'd said, "but Thomas, I don't need—" "I know you don't need them. But if Daniel ever crosses a line, if he ever makes you feel like you're a burden one more time, I want you to call me. And I'll bring these. Let him see exactly what you could afford, and let him understand that you're choosing not to live in luxury somewhere else because you love him, not because you need him." Now Thomas walked into the living room carrying his leather briefcase, and I felt a wave of gratitude for this man who'd always treated me like the sister he'd never had. "Catherine," he said warmly, bending to kiss my cheek. Then he turned to Daniel and Melissa, his expression cooling noticeably. "Daniel! Melissa!" "Uncle Thomas," Daniel said, "Mom said you were bringing some documents?" "I am indeed." Thomas set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. He pulled out a stack of brochures, even more than he'd shown me last week. Your mother called me to discuss her living arrangements, and I've brought comprehensive information about several premier facilities that would suit her needs. He spread the brochures across the table like a fan of playing cards. Each one showed beautifully photographed buildings, smiling seniors in elegant common areas, lush gardens, and luxurious apartments. Daniel picked one up. Palmer Estates, he read. His eyes dropped to the bottom of the page, and I saw his face pale slightly. 15,000 a month? For the premium suites, yes, Thomas said pleasantly. But there are more affordable options. The one-bedroom units start at 12,000. Melissa grabbed another brochure. Sunset Gardens. $10,000 a month minimum? She looked up at me, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. Catherine, these places are... can you even afford... Of course she can afford them, Thomas interrupted smoothly. Catherine has been retired for 4 months and receives a pension of $8,000 monthly, plus she has substantial investment income and savings. Money is not a concern. The room went very quiet. I watched Daniel's face as he processed this information. I'd never discussed my finances with him in detail. He knew I'd had a successful career, knew his father had been well off, but I don't think he'd ever calculated the actual numbers. These places are nicer than our house, Melissa said quietly, still looking at the brochures. Yes, well, they should be at those prices, Thomas replied. Catherine deserves the very best care and comfort in her golden years, don't you think? Daniel was staring at me now. Mom, I didn't mean... When I said assisted living, I was thinking more like something simpler. Cheaper, you mean, I said calmly. No, Let me be very clear, Daniel. You told me I needed to wash dishes or move to a nursing home. Those were your exact words. So I called Thomas, and he's brought me options. These are the facilities I can afford, and frankly, they look quite comfortable. Private apartments, gourmet dining, fitness centers, social activities. I think I'd be very happy at Palmer Estates. Mom, please. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. He set down the brochure. I didn't mean it like that. We're stressed about money right now, and Melissa and I have been fighting, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. You're stressed about money, I repeated. And yet you just tried to send your mother to a nursing home because she didn't wash dishes fast enough after cooking you dinner. Melissa stood up abruptly. This is getting blown out of proportion. Daniel was just asking you to help out more around the house. We both work full-time. You work full-time? I turned to look at her. Melissa, you post photos on Instagram. That's not a job. Her face flushed red. I'm building a brand. I have almost 10,000 followers. And how much income does that generate? Thomas asked, his lawyer voice emerging. Annually? She didn't answer. Catherine cooked dinner for you every night for 3 weeks, Thomas continued. She paid $500 toward your mortgage last week without being asked. She's been nothing but gracious as a guest in your home, and you both treated her like an unwanted burden. Daniel sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Uncle Thomas, I know, I screwed up. Mom, please, don't do this. Don't do what? I asked. You told me to leave. I'm leaving. Not to one of these places. You don't need to. He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Real tears. You don't belong in a nursing home. You're not old. I was being an idiot. Please. I looked at my son, at the man I'd raised, and I felt something crack in my chest. Not my resolve. That was iron. But my heart, maybe. The part that had hoped he'd grown into someone better than this. What exactly were you hoping would happen when you said those words to me? I asked quietly. Did you think I'd just accept it? That I'd go quietly into some depressing facility and let you forget about me? No, Because I need you to understand something, Daniel. I have options. I have money. I have freedom. I don't need you to take care of me. I was staying here as a favor, because my apartment isn't ready yet. And because I thought spending time with you would be good for both of us after your father died. I paused. I was wrong. Catherine, Thomas said gently, perhaps we should discuss where you'll stay for the next 2 weeks until your apartment is ready. I have a hotel reservation already, I said. This was a lie, but I'd make it true within the hour. The Fairmont, a suite. The Fairmont costs $400 a night, Melissa blurted out. Yes, I said. So over 2 weeks it will cost me about $6,000. Still cheaper than a month at Palmer Estates, and I'll have room service. Daniel was shaking his head. Mom, no, please, stay here, I'm begging you. I'll apologize 1,000 times. I'll wash every dish in this house for the next year. Just please don't leave like this. I stood up, and Thomas immediately rose with me, gathering the brochures and placing them back in his briefcase. I'll think about it, I said finally. Really? Hope flared in Daniel's eyes. I'll think about whether I want any relationship with you at all going forward, I clarified. Whether I want you in my life, whether you deserve to be in my life. The hope died. He looked stricken. Mom, you can't mean that. I'm your son. And you just tried to send me to a nursing home because I didn't wash dishes fast enough. I picked up my purse from the side table. Thomas, would you mind giving me a ride? I think I'll go ahead and check into the Fairmont tonight. Of course, Thomas said smoothly. He turned to Daniel and Melissa. I hope you both take some time to reflect on how you've treated Catherine. She's been nothing but generous to you, and this is how you repay her kindness. We walked toward the door. Behind us, I heard Melissa hiss something to Daniel, and then my son was following us. Mom, wait, please, let's talk about this. I made a mistake. I turned at the door. You made a choice, Daniel. You chose to disrespect me, to threaten me, to try to make me feel small and powerless. And the only reason you're sorry now is because you realized I'm not powerless at all. That's not true, isn't it? I looked at him steadily. If I were actually poor, actually dependent on you, would you be apologizing right now? Or would you be feeling relieved that the burden of your mother was being handled? He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. Thomas opened the door, and I walked out into the cool October evening. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. Inside, I felt like I was shattering into 1,000 pieces, but I'd be damned if I'd let them see it. Catherine, I'm proud of you, Thomas said as we reached his car. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because if I opened my mouth, I might start crying, and I wasn't ready for that yet. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house I'd helped buy, where my son lived, where I'd thought I'd be welcome. Daniel was standing in the doorway, his figure backlit by the warm glow from inside. He raised his hand, a tentative wave. I didn't wave back. The Fairmont was exactly as I remembered it, elegant, impersonal, and blessedly quiet. Thomas had offered to stay with me, to make sure I was settled, but I'd sent him home to his wife. I needed to be alone. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed in my suite, still wearing my coat, and stared at the window overlooking the city lights. My phone buzzed. Daniel, calling for the 4th time. I silenced it and set it face down on the nightstand. How had we gotten here? I closed my eyes and let myself remember. Not tonight's horror, but the beginning, before everything went wrong. Daniel had been a wanted baby. Richard and I had tried for 3 years before I finally got pregnant at 25. We'd been so happy, so ready. Richard had painted the nursery himself, a soft yellow, because we'd decided not to find out the gender. We wanted to be surprised. And Daniel had been perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Richard's nose, my eyes. We'd brought him home to our small 2-bedroom apartment in Cambridge, and I'd thought my heart might burst from loving him so much. Richard was building his tech company then, working 18-hour days, but he always made time for Daniel. Saturday mornings were theirs, pancakes and cartoons while I slept in, a luxury I'd cherished. Sunday afternoons, we'd go to the park as a family, pushing Daniel on the swings until he squealed with laughter. Money had been tight in those early years. My marketing job paid decently, but Richard's startup was bleeding cash faster than we could pour it in. I remembered choosing between buying Daniel new shoes or paying the electric bill on time. We'd made it work somehow. We always made it work. Then Richard's company went public. Daniel was 7 years old. I'd been at work when Richard called, his voice shaking with excitement. "Catherine, we're millionaires. Actual millionaires." Everything changed after that. We moved to Brookline, to a house with 5 bedrooms and a yard where Daniel could play. We hired a housekeeper. Richard bought a BMW. I'd been more cautious, still remembering those lean years, but I'd let myself enjoy it. The good schools, the family vacations, the security. Daniel had grown up in that house. He'd learned to ride a bike on that driveway. He'd brought his high school girlfriend home to that living room. He'd left for college from that front door, and I'd stood there crying like a fool while Richard laughed and told me our son would be fine. And he had been fine, mostly. He'd struggled academically, changed his major 3 times, but he'd graduated. Business degree, which had made Richard proud. Then he'd come home and announced he wanted to go for his MBA. "That's wonderful," I'd said, already calculating the cost. State schools were around $40,000 a year for graduate programs. We could manage that. "I got into Wharton," Daniel had said, his face glowing. "Wharton. $150,000 for 2 years. Richard had written the check without blinking. "My son's going to Wharton," he'd told everyone at the club, following in his old man's footsteps. Except Daniel had dropped out after 1 year. He'd called us at midnight on a Tuesday, his voice thick with something, alcohol maybe, or tears. "I can't do this. It's too hard. Everyone here is smarter than me." "Come home," I'd said immediately. "We'll figure it out." And we had. Richard had been disappointed, I knew, though he'd never said it directly to Daniel. But I'd heard him on the phone with his brother Thomas. $75,000 down the drain. Kid doesn't have the discipline. I'd defended Daniel. He was finding himself. He was only 23. He had time. But the years had slipped by, and Daniel had never quite found his footing. He'd worked in marketing, like Mom, he'd said, and I'd been touched. But he'd been let go after 18 months for performance issues. Then he'd tried sales, and that had lasted 2 years before the company downsized. Then he'd gotten his real estate license. "This is it," he'd told us over dinner at our house. He'd been 28 by then. "Real estate is where I'm meant to be. I'm good with people. I can see myself making 6 figures within a year." He'd met Melissa at an open house 6 months later. She'd been there with a girlfriend, she'd told us later, just looking. She was young, only 24 to Daniel's 28, and pretty in a high-maintenance way. Blonde hair that clearly came from a bottle, nails always perfect, clothes that cost more than they should. Richard had disliked her immediately. "Gold digger," he'd muttered to me after their first visit to our house. "She's calculating his net worth in her head." "Don't be unfair," I'd said. "You don't know her." "I know her type." But Daniel had been in love, or what he thought was love. They'd gotten engaged after 6 months, married after a year. Small wedding, Melissa's choice. She'd wanted to save money for their future, she'd said. I thought it was sweet. The wedding had been 5 years ago. Richard had given them $50,000 as a wedding gift. For a down payment on a house, he'd said. They'd bought a house in Newton, a modest 3-bedroom that needed work. Daniel had been so proud showing it to us. "We got a great deal," he'd said. "Needs some cosmetic updates, but the bones are good." What he hadn't told us was that they couldn't actually afford the mortgage on his sporadic real estate commissions and Melissa's non-existent income. 6 months after moving in, he'd called asking to borrow $10,000. "Just temporarily," he'd promised. "I have a big sale about to close." The sale had fallen through. The loan had never been repaid, and there had been other loans after that. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. By the time Richard died 3 years ago, we'd loaned Daniel and Melissa over $100,000 that we'd never seen again. Richard had been 59 when he'd had the heart attack. At his desk, working on a Sunday afternoon, because that's who he was. I'd been in the garden, planting roses. I'd heard the thud from inside the house and known immediately that something was wrong. I'd found him on the floor of his office, clutching his chest. He'd looked at me, his eyes wide with fear and pain, and whispered, "Catherine, love you." Those were the last words he'd said. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was unconscious. He died in the hospital 6 hours later without waking up. Daniel had been devastated. He'd sobbed at the funeral, great heaving sobs that made people whisper sympathetically. "He's lost without his father," someone had said. They were so close. Were they? I'd wondered even then. They'd talked on the phone every Sunday, had lunch once a month. But close. I wasn't sure Daniel had ever really known his father. The real Richard, not just the successful entrepreneur who wrote checks. The reading of the will had been illuminating. Thomas had handled everything, of course. Daniel had sat next to Melissa, both of them dressed in black, expectant. "To my beloved wife Catherine," Thomas had read, "I leave everything. The house, the investments, the business holdings, all of it. She built this life with me, and it belongs to her." I'd watched Daniel's face, watched the confusion, then the disappointment. He'd actually thought Richard would leave him money directly. A trust fund, an inheritance, something. "What about me?" he'd asked. "Did Dad leave me anything?" "Your father's will establishes a trust that Catherine controls," Thomas had explained. "She has complete discretion over distributions." After the reading, Melissa had pulled Daniel aside, and I'd heard her angry whisper, "That's bullshit. Half of that should be yours." "It's Mom's," Daniel had said weakly. "Dad wanted her to have it." "Because he didn't think you could handle it," Melissa had snapped. I'd pretended not to hear. But the words had stayed with me, because she'd been right, in a way. Richard hadn't trusted Daniel with money. He'd told me as much, years ago. "When I die," Richard had said one night, lying in bed beside me, "everything goes to you. Don't give Daniel lump sums. He'll blow through it. If he needs something, help him, but don't just hand him cash." "He's our son," I'd protested. "He's our son who's never earned anything on his own." "I love him, Catherine, but I don't trust him with money, and I really don't trust her." Her. Melissa. Richard had never warmed to her, not in the 4 years he'd known her before his death. The first year after Richard died was a blur. I'd been drowning in grief, barely able to function. The house felt enormous and empty. I'd wander through the rooms Richard had walked through, touching his things, crying until I had no tears left. Daniel had visited regularly at first, every weekend, usually with Melissa. They'd been supportive, I'd thought, caring. But now, looking back, I could see the pattern. Every visit ended with them needing something: money for repairs on their house, money for Melissa's business expenses for her Instagram, money because Daniel's real estate sales were slow. I'd given it to them, not because I was stupid, but because Daniel was all I had left of Richard, all I had left of the family we'd built. And if money was what he needed from me, then I'd give him money. 3 months ago, I'd finally made the decision to sell the house. 5 bedrooms for one grieving widow was absurd. Thomas had agreed. "It's time to start fresh, Catherine. Richard would want you to live, not exist as a ghost in your own home." I'd listed it, and it had sold within a week. A young couple with 3 children who'd walked through and immediately fallen in love with the backyard, the neighborhood, the charm. They'd offered me $3.2 million, which was $100,000 over asking. I'd taken it. Then I'd started looking for an apartment, something modern, something without memories. I'd found the perfect place. A new building in the Seaport District, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows with harbor views, a chef's kitchen, a balcony, 1,500 square feet of possibility. The only problem was that it needed renovations. The previous owner had installed dark wood floors that I hated, and the kitchen needed updating. My contractor had estimated 6 weeks for the work. "You'll need somewhere to stay," Thomas had pointed out. "Have you thought about where?" I had thought about it. I could afford a hotel for 6 weeks. I could afford to stay anywhere. But Daniel had called me that same day. "Mom, I heard you sold the house. Where are you going to live?" "I bought an apartment," I told him. "But it needs some work. I'll stay in a hotel until it's ready." "A hotel? For 6 weeks? Mom, that's crazy. Come stay with us. We have the guest room. It'll be nice. We can spend time together." I'd hesitated. Melissa had been making comments lately, little digs about my wealth and their struggles. But Daniel had sounded so sincere, so much like the little boy who used to crawl into bed with Richard and me during thunderstorms. "Are you sure Melissa won't mind?" I'd asked. "Are you kidding? She'd love to have you. Please, Mom, let us do this for you." So I'd agreed. I'd moved in 3 weeks ago with 2 suitcases and the hope that maybe, finally, Daniel and I could rebuild what we'd lost when Richard died. Instead, tonight had happened. I opened my eyes and looked around the hotel suite. This was my reality now. Alone in a hotel room, my only child having just told me to go to a nursing home. My phone buzzed again. Not Daniel this time. A text from Thomas. "Are you okay? Call me if you need anything. Sarah and I are here for you." I typed back, "I'm fine. Thank you for tonight. I don't know what I would have done without you." His response came immediately. "You would have handled it perfectly, because that's who you are. You're the strongest woman I know. Richard always said that." I set down the phone and felt the tears finally come. Not for Daniel, not even for Richard, really. But for myself, for the life I'd thought I was building, for the family I'd thought I had. I cried until my head ached and my eyes were swollen. Then I washed my face, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. If I was going to be alone, I was going to do it on my own terms, and I was going to make sure Daniel understood exactly what he'd thrown away tonight. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from Daniel. I scrolled through them while drinking the coffee room service had brought up. "Mom, please call me back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Melissa feels terrible too. We both do." That last one made me laugh, though there was no humor in it. Melissa felt terrible. Sure she did. I set the phone down and looked out the window at Boston Harbor. The water was gray under the October sky, choppy with whitecaps. I'd always loved this view. Richard and I had talked about buying a waterfront property someday when we retired. "We'll watch the boats," he'd said, "drink wine on the deck, finally have time to just be." We'd never gotten that time, and now I was here alone, watching the boats without him. My phone rang, not Daniel this time. Sophie Chen, my best friend for the last 20 years. "I heard," she said without preamble when I answered. "Thomas called Mark last night. Catherine, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Mark was Sophie's husband, also a lawyer, and a good friend of Thomas's. Of course Thomas had told them. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Bullshit. Where are you? I'm coming over." "Sophie, you don't need to. Address, now." I gave her the hotel name and suite number. She arrived 40 minutes later with bagels, cream cheese, and a bottle of wine. "It's 9 in the morning, I pointed out, and you were told to go to a nursing home by your own son last night. I think wine is appropriate." She set everything down on the table and pulled me into a hug. I'm so angry I could spit. Sophie was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, but she had the protective instincts of a mama bear. She'd never particularly liked Daniel, and she'd actively disliked Melissa from the moment they met. "Gold-plated gold digger," she'd said after Daniel's engagement party. "That girl has dollar signs in her eyes." "You're being harsh," I'd protested. "Mark up my words, Catherine. She's going to bleed you dry." Mark up my words. It was Sophie's version of mark my words, a linguistic quirk that had always made me smile. Now I wondered if she'd been right all along. We sat at the table, and Sophie made me eat a bagel while she poured wine into hotel coffee mugs. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The whole story, from the dinner I'd cooked to the dishes, to Daniel's ultimatum, to Thomas arriving with the brochures. Sophie's face grew progressively darker as I talked. "That little shit," she said when I finished. "And Melissa. God, I'd like to slap that smug look off her face. Sophie, no, I mean it. You've given them everything. Everything. And this is how they treat you?" She took a long drink of wine. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to cut him off completely. Just be done with it. But he's my son, Sophie. He's all I have left of Richard. He's a 32-year-old man who threatened to put his mother in a home because she didn't wash dishes fast enough. That's not Richard's son. That's Melissa's husband." There was truth in that. The Daniel I'd raised would never have spoken to me that way. But somewhere along the line, he'd changed. Or maybe I'd just never seen who he really was. My phone rang again. Daniel, of course. I declined the call. "You're not answering?" Sophie asked. "Not yet. He needs to sit with what he did." "Good. Let him squirm." She spread cream cheese on a bagel and handed it to me. "What about the apartment? When does the renovation finish?" 2 more weeks. The contractor says everything is on schedule." "So you'll stay here until then?" I nodded. "It's comfortable enough, and it's neutral. No memories." Sophie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know you could stay with us. We have the guest suite, and Mark would love to have you." "I know. But I need some space right now, to think." "About what?" "About what kind of relationship I want with Daniel going forward, if I want one at all." Sophie didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Catherine, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. You don't owe him anything. Not your money, not your time, not your forgiveness. He's an adult. He made choices, and those choices have consequences." "He's my son," I said again, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. "Being your son doesn't give him the right to abuse you. And that's what last night was. Abuse. Emotional abuse. You cooked dinner for his family, and he demanded you wash dishes or move to a nursing home. That's not normal. That's not okay." I knew she was right. But 32 years of motherhood, of putting Daniel first, of sacrificing for him, that didn't just disappear overnight. My phone buzzed with a text. Not Daniel this time. Melissa. "Catherine, we need to talk. Daniel is beside himself. Please call him." I showed Sophie the message. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, now she uses your full name. Last week she was calling you Kate, like you were best friends." That was true. Melissa had started using the nickname a few weeks ago. "It's cuter," she'd said. "Catherine sounds so formal." I'd hated it but hadn't said anything. Another thing I should have addressed and didn't. I typed back, "I need some space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." The response came within seconds. "This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Daniel made one mistake and you're acting like it's the end of the world." Sophie read over my shoulder and made a strangled noise. "One mistake? One? Catherine, don't you dare respond to that." But I was already typing. "Daniel told me to go to a nursing home because I didn't wash dishes. If you think that's one mistake, we have very different definitions." "You were being difficult. He was stressed. We're under a lot of pressure right now financially, and having you here has been hard." There it was. The real issue. Money. It always came back to money with them. "I paid you $500 toward your mortgage last week," I typed. "I cooked every meal. I cleaned. How exactly was I a burden?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. "It's not about money. It's about respect. You're a guest in our home, and you haven't been acting like it." Sophie grabbed my phone. "No, stop engaging with her. She's trying to manipulate you and you're letting her." She was right. I knew she was right. But I felt this compulsive need to defend myself, to make them understand that I hadn't done anything wrong. "They're not going to understand," Sophie said, reading my expression. "People like Melissa never think they're the problem. It's always someone else's fault." We spent the rest of the morning talking, drinking wine, eating bagels. Sophie told me about her daughter's new job, her husband's golf obsession, the cruise they were planning for January. Normal life things. It felt good to focus on something other than the disaster of last night. Around noon, there was a knock on my door. Sophie and I looked at each other. "If that's Daniel, I swear to God," Sophie muttered. I looked through the peephole. It was Thomas, holding a manila folder. I opened the door and he smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry to intrude. I tried calling, but you didn't answer." "I've been avoiding my phone," I admitted. "Come in. You remember Sophie?" "Of course." Thomas shook Sophie's hand and then held up the folder. "I brought some documents I think you should review about your financial situation with Daniel." We sat down, and Thomas spread several papers across the table. Bank statements, copies of checks, loan agreements I'd signed years ago. "I took the liberty of calculating exactly how much money you've given Daniel over the last 10 years, Thomas said. "Not loaned, given. Money he's never paid back." I looked at the number at the bottom of the page and felt my stomach drop. $347,000. "That can't be right," I said. "It's right. I went through your bank records going back to 2015, the MBA tuition, $75,000. The house down payment, $50,000. The wedding gift, $50,000. Then all the loans over the years, car repairs, mortgage payments, credit card debt, Melissa's business expenses. It adds up. $347,000. I'd given my son enough money to buy a house outright, and he'd told me to go to a nursing home." Sophie was staring at the paper, her face pale. "Catherine, did you know it was this much?" "No. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but I never added it up. Whenever he needed something, I gave it to him." "And he never paid any of it back," Thomas said quietly. "Not $1. I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't just about the money, though $347,000 was nothing to dismiss. It was about the pattern, the taking without gratitude, the expectation that I would always be there, always say yes, always solve his problems. "There's something else," Thomas said, pulling out another document. "I did some checking. Daniel hasn't filed his taxes in 2 years." "What?" I stared at him. "How is that possible?" "He applied for extensions both years but never actually filed. He owes the IRS approximately $60,000 in back taxes and penalties." "How do you know this?" Sophie asked. "I'm his uncle and a lawyer. I have my ways." Thomas looked at me. "Catherine, I'm telling you this because I think he's planning to ask you for money to cover it. And I think you need to be prepared to say no." Say no. Such simple words. But I'd never been good at saying no to Daniel. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Whitmore? This is Janet Bradley from Cornerstone Realty. I'm Daniel Whitmore's broker. I'm calling because Daniel has missed his desk fee payments for the last 3 months, and we need to resolve this issue before—" "I'm sorry," I interrupted. "Why are you calling me about Daniel's desk fees?" "He listed you as his emergency contact and financial backup. He said if there were ever any issues with payment, we should contact you." I closed my eyes. Of course he had. "How much does he owe?" $4,500. If it's not paid by Friday, we'll have to terminate his affiliation with our brokerage." I looked at Thomas and Sophie, both watching me with concern. "I appreciate you calling, Ms. Bradley, but I'm not responsible for Daniel's business expenses. He'll need to handle this himself." There was a pause. "Are you sure? He seemed very confident that you would—" "I'm sure. Thank you for calling. I hung up and set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. He listed you as his financial backup? Sophie said incredulously. Without asking you? Apparently. I felt numb. Each new revelation was like another layer being peeled back, showing me the truth I'd been avoiding for years. What else don't I know? Thomas hesitated. Catherine, I don't want to pile on, but there's one more thing. Daniel took out a second mortgage on his house 6 months ago. $80,000. For what? I don't know. But according to public records, he's already 2 payments behind. $80,000, plus $60,000 in back taxes, plus $4,500 in desk fees. My son was drowning in debt, and instead of asking me for help honestly, he'd been making me feel like a burden for staying in his house for 3 weeks. He was going to ask me, I said slowly, realization dawning. That's why he wanted me to stay with them, not because he wanted to spend time with me, because he was working up to asking for money. And when you didn't offer it on your own, Melissa probably told him to make you leave, Sophie added. Easier to ask for money from a distance than from someone living in your house seeing how you actually spend it. It made horrible, perfect sense. The way Melissa had been about my not contributing. The comments about needing their space. The escalating hostility. They'd been trying to make me so uncomfortable I'd leave, and then they'd call asking for help with their crisis. My phone rang again. Daniel. This time I answered. Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning. I know about the taxes, I said, and the second mortgage, and the desk fees. Silence. Mom, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you listed me as your financial backup without asking? Why you took out a second mortgage and didn't tell me? Why you're drowning in debt but treated me like I was the problem? It's not like that. Things just got out of control. The market has been slow, and Melissa's been pressuring me about money, and I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to threaten me with a nursing home? I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean it. I was just so stressed, and when you didn't offer to help. When I didn't offer to help, I repeated. Daniel, I've given you $347,000 over the last 10 years. How much more help did you want? Another silence. Then quietly. You kept track? No. Thomas did. Because he's been watching you take advantage of me for years, and he wanted me to see the truth. I wasn't taking advantage. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. And there it was. The entitlement, the expectation, the belief that my money was somehow his money, that I owed him support simply because he existed. I don't owe you anything, I said, and as I said it, I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting. I've helped you because I loved you, because I wanted you to succeed. But you didn't want to succeed, Daniel. You wanted me to fund your failure. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I cooked dinner for you and your wife, and you told me to wash dishes or move to a nursing home. How is that fair? I said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo what you said. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you see me as an ATM instead of your mother. Mom, please, we can work this out. Just come back to the house, and we'll talk. I'm not coming back to your house, ever. Don't be dramatic. Where are you going to stay? I'm staying at the Fairmont until my apartment is ready. And Daniel? Don't call me again asking for money. The bank is closed. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly calm, clear-headed for the first time in days. Thomas was smiling. I'm proud of you. I should have done that years ago. Maybe, but you did it now. That's what matters. Sophie raised her coffee mug of wine. To Catherine Whitmore, finally putting her foot down. I clinked my mug against hers, and we drank. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. You're really going to abandon your own son over one mistake? What kind of mother are you? I showed it to Sophie and Thomas. Sophie's face went red. "Let me respond," she said, reaching for my phone. "No." I took it back and typed carefully. The kind of mother who gave her son every advantage and watched him throw it away. The kind who cooked and cleaned and paid and supported while being treated like an inconvenience. The kind who knows when enough is enough. Don't contact me again. I blocked both their numbers before I could second-guess myself. Now what? Thomas asked gently. Now I wait for my apartment to be ready. I start my new life, and I figure out who I am without being Daniel's mother or Richard's wife. It sounded brave. It sounded empowered. Inside, I felt terrified and heartbroken, but I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free. 2 days passed in a strange, suspended peace. I spent my time walking along the harbor, reading in coffee shops, avoiding my phone. Sophie called twice a day to check on me. Thomas stopped by once with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. Other than that, I was alone with my thoughts, and my thoughts were a mess. I kept replaying that night in the kitchen. Daniel's face twisted with anger. His words, "Either you wash these dishes, or you need to seriously consider other living arrangements, like a nursing home." I'd told Sophie and Thomas I was done. I'd blocked Daniel and Melissa's numbers. I'd meant it in the moment, but late at night, lying in the hotel bed, I wondered if I'd overreacted. He was my son, my only child. Was I really going to throw away our entire relationship over one terrible night? On the third morning, I unblocked Daniel's number. Not because I wanted to talk to him, I wasn't ready for that, but because some small, masochistic part of me needed to see if he'd tried to reach me. He had. 37 text messages. I scrolled through them. The first dozen were apologies. Variations on, "I'm so sorry, please forgive me, I didn't mean it." Then they shifted. "Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage. I'm in real trouble here." Then, "The IRS is threatening to put a lien on the house. I need your help." Then, "Are you really going to let me lose everything because your feelings are hurt?" That one made me pause. Your feelings are hurt. As if what he'd done was some minor social faux pas, like forgetting my birthday or showing up late for dinner. The most recent message had come an hour ago. "Fine. If you want to be petty, be petty. But don't expect me to forgive you when you finally decide to be reasonable." I set the phone down and walked to the window. The harbor was gray again, rain starting to fall. I watched the water and felt something crystallize inside me. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was about respect, about recognizing abuse when it happened, even when it came from someone you loved. Richard had once told me something I'd never forgotten. We'd been watching a documentary about domestic violence, and I'd said something naive about not understanding why women stayed with abusive partners. "Because love is complicated," Richard had said quietly. "Because abusers aren't monsters every moment. They're wonderful sometimes. They make you feel special. And then they hurt you. And then they apologize and swear it'll never happen again. And you want to believe them because you remember the good times." But surely there's a moment when you just know," I'd insisted. "When you decide you deserve better." "Maybe," Richard had said. "Or maybe you just wake up one day and realize that the person you love doesn't actually exist. That you've been in love with a version of them that you created in your head. And the real them, the one who hurts you and makes excuses, that's who they've been all along." I'd thought he was being melodramatic. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something about Daniel even then. My phone rang. Not Daniel, a local number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Whitmore? This is Amanda Ross from Newton Pediatric Associates. I'm calling because your grandson has you listed as an emergency contact." My heart stopped. Grandson? There must be some mistake. My son doesn't have children. "I apologize. I'm looking at the wrong file." Oh, I see. This is actually about Daniel Whitmore's account. He's past due on several copays, and when we called the number on file, it was disconnected. Your name is listed as an alternate contact. How much does he owe? I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to pay it. $215. Such a small amount. Once upon a time, I would have given my credit card number over the phone without hesitation. Now I said, I'm sorry, but Daniel is an adult. He's responsible for his own medical bills. You'll need to work that out with him directly. After I hung up, I sat very still. Daniel had been going to doctors and listing me as the person to call when he didn't pay. How many other places had my name? How many other debts were floating around with me as the backup plan? I called Thomas. I need you to do something for me, I said when he answered. I need you to find out everywhere Daniel has listed me as financially responsible. Medical offices, credit cards, utilities, everything. Catherine, are you sure you want to know? I'm sure. All right, give me a few days. But it didn't take a few days. Thomas called back 3 hours later. You might want to sit down, he said. I sat. In addition to the medical offices, there are 4 of those. Daniel listed you as a co-signer on a credit card he opened 2 years ago. You never signed anything, but he forged your signature. The room tilted. He forged my signature? Yes. The credit card has a balance of $23,000, and it's been in default for 6 months. The creditors have been trying to reach you at your old house. Since it sold, the letters have been going to Daniel's address. He's been getting collection letters for a card he opened in my name, and he never told me. There's more. He also listed you as a co-borrower on the second mortgage. Again, forged signature. The bank never verified it properly because you're his mother and you have excellent credit. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. My son, the baby I'd carried, the child I'd raised, the man I'd defended to everyone, including his own father, had committed fraud using my name. Catherine, are you there? I'm here, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant. What do I do? You have 2 options. 1, you can report the fraud to the police and the banks. This would clear you of any financial responsibility, but Daniel would likely face criminal charges. Criminal charges, my son in handcuffs, in court, possibly in jail. Or, I asked, or you can pay off the debts and move on with your life. It would cost you approximately $105,000 to clear everything, the credit card, the mortgage payments he's behind on, the IRS debt, and the various medical bills and fees. $105,000, on top of the $347,000 I'd already given him. If I pay it, I said slowly, he gets away with forgery, with fraud. He faces no consequences. Yes. And if I report it, he could go to jail. Yes. I closed my eyes. Either way, I lost my son, either to the justice system or to my own decision to finally stop enabling him. There's a third option, Thomas said quietly. You could confront him. Show him that you know what he's done. Give him a chance to come clean and make things right. And if he doesn't, then you'll know exactly who he is, and you can make your decision from there. I sat in that hotel room for a long time after hanging up with Thomas, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. My son had forged my signature, had committed fraud using my identity, had racked up debts in my name and let them go to collections without telling me. And when I'd been staying in his house, uncomfortable and unwelcome, he'd been hiding all of this, planning to ask me for money, maybe planning to ask me to pay off debts I didn't even know existed. I picked up my phone and unblocked Daniel's number. Then I typed a single message. We need to meet. Tomorrow 2 p.m. at the cafe on Newberry Street. Come alone. If Melissa is with you, I'm leaving. His response came within seconds. I'll be there. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for giving me another chance. I didn't respond, because I wasn't giving him another chance. I was giving him a choice. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and chose a table by the window where I could see the street. I wanted to know if Melissa was with him before he even entered. I ordered coffee I didn't want and watched the door. Daniel arrived exactly on time. Alone, thank God. He looked terrible, unshaven, his hair uncombed, his shirt wrinkled. He spotted me and walked over, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. "Mom," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled my hand back. "Sit down, Daniel." He sat, looking wounded. "I'm so glad you agreed to meet. I've been going crazy these past few days. I need you to know how sorry I am." "Stop." I held up my hand. "I didn't come here to listen to another apology. I came here to give you an opportunity to tell me the truth." His face went pale. "The truth about what?" "About everything. About your finances, your debts, the choices you've made." I paused. "About what you've done using my name." I watched him carefully, watched his eyes dart away from mine, his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed, watched him calculate what I might know versus what I might be fishing for. "I don't know what you mean," he said finally. "Yes, you do." I pulled a folder from my bag, the one Thomas had given me yesterday with all the documentation. I set it on the table between us, but didn't open it. "I'm going to ask you some questions, Daniel, and I need you to answer honestly, because this is your last chance." "Last chance for what?" "To have a mother." That got his attention. His eyes widened and he leaned forward. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Let's start simple. How much money do you owe the IRS?" He hesitated. I'm a little behind on taxes." "How much?" "Maybe 15,000? I opened the folder and pulled out the document from Thomas. "Try 60,000. Daniel's face crumbled. Okay, yes, 60,000. But I'm working on a payment plan." "No, you're not. You haven't responded to any of their letters." Thomas checked. I pulled out another document. "What about the second mortgage? When were you planning to tell me you took out $80,000 against your house?" Melissa said we needed it for renovations. You're 2 payments behind. The bank is threatening foreclosure." I know, and I was going to ask you to help, but then everything happened and I didn't know how. How much do you owe on the credit card you opened in my name?" The cafe went quiet. Or maybe it just felt that way because all the blood had drained from Daniel's face. Mom, I never. $23,000, Daniel. On a credit card you opened using my name and my social security number. A credit card I never authorized. Do you know what that's called?" He was shaking his head, his hands trembling. "It's not like that. I was going to pay it off before you ever found out. I just needed it temporarily. You forged my signature. That's fraud. That's a crime. I'm your son." His voice cracked. "Parents help their children. That's what you're supposed to do." A woman at the next table glanced over. I lowered my voice, forcing myself to stay calm even though I wanted to scream. "Parents help their children," I repeated. "I've given you $347,000 over the last 10 years. I paid for your MBA that you didn't finish. I gave you the down payment for your house. I've covered your bills, your debts, your mistakes over and over again. And still, it wasn't enough. You had to steal from me too." I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing without asking. Without telling me. Without any intention of paying it back. That's stealing, Daniel. He put his head in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "What do you want me to say? That I'm a failure? That I'm not the son you wanted? Fine. I'm a failure. I've always been a failure. Dad knew it. You know it. Everyone knows it. This isn't about being a failure. This is about being dishonest. About using me. I didn't use you. I love you. Do you? Or do you love my money?" The question hung between us. I watched him struggle with it, watched him try to find an answer that would satisfy both of us. But there wasn't one. "Both," he said finally. "I love you, and I need your help. Why can't it be both?" Because love doesn't involve forgery. Love doesn't involve fraud. Love doesn't involve telling your mother to go to a nursing home because she didn't wash dishes fast enough. I said I was sorry about that. You said you were sorry because Thomas showed up with brochures for luxury retirement communities and you realized I didn't need you. You weren't sorry for what you said. You were sorry it didn't work. Daniel was crying now, tears running down his face. "What do you want from me? You want me to beg? Fine. I'm begging. Please, Mom. I'm drowning here. The house, the taxes, the credit cards. I can't do this alone. I need you." Part of me, the part that had been a mother for 32 years, wanted to reach across the table and comfort him. Wanted to fix it all, pay the debts, make the problems disappear. That's what I'd always done. But I thought about Richard's words, about being in love with a version of someone that doesn't exist, about the real person being the one who hurts you. This was the real Daniel. Not the baby I'd held, not the child who'd crawled into bed during thunderstorms. This was a 32-year-old man who'd forged my signature, stolen my identity, threatened me with a nursing home, and was now crying, not because he was sorry, but because he was scared. "I have a proposal for you," I said. Hope flared in his eyes. "Anything. I'll do anything. I'll pay off all your debts, the IRS, the credit card in my name, the mortgage payments you're behind on, all of it. Approximately $105,000. Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. I swear I'll pay you back." "I'm not finished. In exchange, you're going to sign a document that Thomas has prepared. It states that you acknowledge the debt, that you agree to pay it back at $500 per month with interest, and that if you miss a payment, I can take legal action to recover the funds." His face fell. $500 a month? Mom, I can't afford. "You'll find a way. Get a second job, cut expenses, sell things. I don't care how you do it, but you'll do it." "And if I can't?" "Then I'll put a lien on your house, or I'll report the credit card fraud to the police, and you'll face criminal charges. Your choice." Daniel stared at me like I'd become someone he didn't recognize. Maybe I had. "You would really do that?" he whispered. "You'd send me to jail?" "If you force me to, yes, because Daniel, I'm done enabling you. I'm done being the safety net that lets you make terrible decisions without consequences. This is your chance to become the man I raised you to be, or it's your chance to show me that man never existed. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm your son. And I'm your mother, not your bank. Sign the agreement, make the payments, and maybe, we can rebuild some kind of relationship. Or refuse, and I walk away right now. Those are your options." He was shaking his head, tears still streaming. "Melissa will never agree to this. $500 a month. We can't live on what's left. Then Melissa needs to get an actual job. Instagram isn't paying your bills. You don't understand what it's like for us. The pressure, the stress. I don't care." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften them. "I don't care about your stress or your pressure or Melissa's Instagram dreams. I care that you committed fraud. I care that you treated me like garbage. And I care that even now sitting here, you haven't once actually apologized for what you did. You've only apologized for getting caught." That landed. I saw it in his face, the realization that I was right. "I'm sorry," he said, but it sounded hollow, rehearsed. "Are you? Or are you sorry that your ATM just closed?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" I leaned forward. "I cooked you dinner 3 weeks running. I cleaned your house. I paid part of your mortgage without being asked. And you responded by telling me to wash dishes or move to a nursing home. Where's the fairness in that? I was angry. People say things when they're angry. Yes, they do. And what they say when they're angry is usually what they really think. You think I'm a burden. You think I owe you. You think my job is to fund your life while you give me nothing in return. That's not true, isn't it? I pulled out another document. This is a list of every time you've called me in the last year. Do you want to know how many of those calls were just to talk? To see how I was doing? To ask about my life? He didn't answer. 0, Daniel. 0 calls that weren't about money or favors or you needing something. The only time you invited me to stay with you was when you were planning to ask me for more money. You don't love me? You love what I can do for you? Mom, please. I'm not finished. This agreement I'm offering you, it's more than you deserve. If I were smart, I'd report the fraud and let you face the consequences. But I'm your mother, and some stupid part of me still hopes you might turn into a decent person. So I'm giving you this chance, but it's the last one. I pulled out the agreement Thomas had drafted and set it on the table with a pen. Sign it, and I pay your debts today. You start making payments next month, or don't sign it, and I walk out of here and go straight to the police station. You have 2 minutes to decide. Daniel stared at the document like it was a snake. Can I take it home? Talk to Melissa? No, you decide now, without Melissa. This is between you and me. But she's my wife. And I'm your mother, the woman you threatened, the woman whose identity you stole. Melissa doesn't get a vote. I watched him struggle, watched him calculate whether he could talk me out of this, whether there was some other way. Finally, reluctantly, he picked up the pen. If I sign this, we're okay? We can go back to normal? Define normal. If you mean, can you call me when you need money and I'll just give it to you? No, that's over. But if you mean, can we possibly have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of financial transactions, maybe? If you prove you're capable of it. He signed. His hand shook, but he signed. I took the document, folded it, and put it back in my folder. Then I pulled out my phone and transferred $105,000 to his account. I showed him the confirmation. It's done. The debts are paid. But Daniel, if you miss a single payment, if you forge my signature ever again, if you ever speak to me the way you did that night in your kitchen, we're done. Do you understand? He nodded, not meeting my eyes. Say it. I understand. Good. I stood up, gathering my things. I'm going to leave now. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. Don't text me asking for advice or money or anything else. When you make your first payment, call Thomas. He'll be handling this going forward. You're not even going to give me a hug? His voice was small, childlike. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a vast empty sadness for what could have been and wasn't. No, I said. I'm not. I walked out of the cafe into the gray afternoon. It was raining lightly, and I didn't have an umbrella, but I didn't care. I walked for blocks, letting the rain soak through my coat, feeling something inside me break and heal simultaneously. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. How did it go? I typed back, it's done. He signed. I'm free. Free. Such a strange word for what I felt, because I wasn't free of Daniel. He'd always be my son. But I was free of the obligation to fix him, to save him, to sacrifice myself for someone who didn't value the sacrifice. I was free to be Catherine Whitmore again, not Daniel's mother, not Richard's widow, just myself. And for the first time in 32 years, I had no idea who that was. But I was going to find out. 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment watching the sunset over Boston Harbor. The renovation had been completed right on schedule, and I'd moved in 6 weeks ago. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors in a warm honey tone, a kitchen with marble countertops where I'd learned to cook for one. It was beautiful. It was mine. And it was quiet. The silence had been the hardest part to adjust to. After years of Richard's presence, then Daniel's demands, then the chaos of those 3 weeks in his house, the silence of living alone felt almost oppressive at first. but I'd learned to fill it. With music, with podcasts, with the sound of my own thoughts. My phone rang. Thomas, right on schedule for his weekly check-in. "How are you?" he asked when I answered. "Good. Really good, actually." Daniel made his payment this month, on time for once. It was true. The first 2 months, he'd been late, once by a week, once by 10 days. Both times, Thomas had sent him a formal reminder about the consequences of missing payments. The third month, the payment had come through on the first of the month. "That's progress," I said. "It is." Though Melissa called me last week trying to negotiate a lower monthly payment, I told her the terms weren't negotiable. I smiled despite myself. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of talk about how unfair you're being, how Daniel is suffering, how you're destroying their lives. And you said? I reminded her that fraud is a crime, and that Catherine was being extraordinarily generous by not pressing charges. That shut her up pretty quickly. I walked to the window, watching the boats in the harbor. It was January now, and the water looked cold and uninviting, but the view was still beautiful. "Have you heard from him at all?" Thomas asked carefully. "No, and I'm okay with that." It was true. Daniel hadn't called or texted since that day in the cafe. Part of me wondered if he ever would. Part of me didn't care. "You know," Thomas said, "Richard would be proud of you. What you did took real courage." Did it? Sometimes I wonder if I'm just a terrible mother. What kind of woman charges her own son interest on a loan? The kind who recognizes that enabling bad behavior isn't love. Catherine, you gave Daniel every advantage. You paid for his education, his house, his mistakes, and he responded by stealing from you. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you a healthy person. After we hung up, I made myself dinner. Salmon with roasted vegetables, a recipe I'd learned from a cooking class I'd taken last month. Another new thing. I'd been collecting them. Cooking classes, art museums, a book club Sophie had dragged me to. Small ways of filling my days with something other than grief and regret. The book club had been surprisingly good. 8 women, all around my age, meeting every other week to discuss whatever we'd read. This month, it was a novel about a woman who'd left her husband after 30 years of marriage. The parallels to my own life weren't lost on me, though I'd left a son rather than a spouse. "Do you think she made the right choice?" one of the women had asked during our last meeting. "Leaving everything behind?" "I think she made the only choice she could live with," I'd said. And then, surprising myself, I'd told them about Daniel. Not all of it, not the fraud or the money, but the basics. The nursing home comment, the decision to set boundaries. The room had gone quiet. Then one woman, Margaret, had reached across and squeezed my hand. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 5 years," she'd said, "because I wouldn't let her move back home with her 3 kids and no job. And you know what? I miss her every day, but I don't regret it. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means saying no." I'd been thinking about that a lot lately. My doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the intercom and smiled when I saw Sophie's face on the screen. "Surprise," she said when I opened the door. "I brought wine and gossip." "You always bring wine and gossip." "Yes, but this time the gossip is particularly juicy." She swept into my apartment and headed straight for the kitchen, pulling wine glasses from the cabinet like she lived here. "You're going to want to sit down for this." We settled on the couch, wine poured, and Sophie turned to me with barely contained excitement. "I ran into Melissa at Whole Foods this morning." My stomach tightened. "And?" "And she's working there, in the deli department, hair in a net, slicing turkey, the whole thing." I blinked. Melissa has a job? A real, actual job with a paycheck and everything. I couldn't believe it either. I tried to sneak past without her seeing me, but she called out my name. Sophie took a sip of wine. "She looked tired, Catherine. Not Instagram filter tired. Actually exhausted, tired. Did she say anything about Daniel? She said he's working 2 jobs now. His real estate work during the day and he's driving for Uber at night. They're barely making it, but they're making it. I didn't know what to feel. Relief that Daniel was finally working for something? Guilt that he was struggling? Pride that he was stepping up? She also said, and this is the really interesting part, she said she wishes they'd treated you better, that they'd realized too late what they had. She said that? Exact words. We were idiots. We had Catherine's support and love, and we threw it away for nothing. Then she started crying right there in the deli section. It was extremely awkward. I sat back against the couch cushions, processing this. Melissa, working a real job. Daniel, driving Uber, both of them apparently regretting how they'd treated me. How do you feel about that? Sophie asked. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. Like, see, you should have appreciated what you had. But part of me just feels sad. Sad that it came to this. Sad that they only valued me after I was gone. That's very mature of you. I'd be doing a victory dance. I laughed. Maybe I'll do that later in private. Sophie stayed for another hour, catching me up on her life, her daughter's new boyfriend, her husband's retirement plans. Normal things, friend things, things that had nothing to do with Daniel or money or fraud. After she left, I cleaned up the wine glasses and returned to the window. The city lights were coming on, twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably driving someone to the airport, tired and probably resentful. Melissa was probably at home, her feet aching from standing all day in the deli. And I was here, in my beautiful apartment, alone but not lonely, free but not quite healed. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Mom, it's Daniel. I got a new phone. I just wanted you to know I made this month's payment. And I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. I love you. I read it 3 times, the first time with anger, the second with sadness, the third with something that might have been the beginning of acceptance. I typed back, I received the payment. Thank you for honoring the agreement. I didn't say I love you. I didn't say I forgave him, because I wasn't sure I did. But I also didn't say, never call me again. Maybe that was progress. Maybe that was enough for now. I saved his number in my phone, not under Daniel, but under D. Whitmore, and set the phone aside. Then I poured myself the last of Sophie's wine and stood at the window, watching the city. Richard and I had planned to travel in retirement, Paris, Rome, Tokyo. We'd made lists, bookmarked hotels, talked endlessly about all the things we'd do when we finally had time. We'd never gotten that time, but I still had it. I opened my laptop and pulled up a travel website. First-class ticket to Paris, departing in 2 weeks. A month-long stay in a small apartment in the Marais. Cooking classes, museum passes, wine tours. I booked it before I could talk myself out of it. Then I texted Sophie, I'm going to Paris for a month. Want to come? Her response came immediately. Are you serious? Yes? OMG, yes. When do we leave? I smiled and booked her ticket too. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. My marriage had ended too soon. My relationship with my son was broken, maybe permanently. I was 57 years old and starting over in ways I'd never imagined. But I was starting over, and maybe that was the point. The phone buzzed again. Sophie. I'm going to Paris. I'm going to Paris. Mark says I deserve it, and he's proud of me for being spontaneous. Then Thomas. Heard you're going to Paris. Good for you, Catherine. Enjoy every minute. And finally, unexpectedly, Daniel. That's great, Mom. You always wanted to see Paris. I hope you have an amazing time. I looked at that last message for a long time. Then I typed, thank you. 2 words, small but honest, because I was done pretending to feel things I didn't feel, done sacrificing myself for others, done being anyone other than exactly who I was. Catherine Whitmore, 57 years old, widow, mother to a complicated son, financially independent, about to spend a month in Paris with her best friend. It wasn't the life I'd planned. But looking out at the harbor, wine glass in hand, I realized something. It might actually be better.